Good morning. We are live in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. It's Tuesday, February 27th, and we are back on S289 related to age-appropriate design code. And our first witness up is Leman Qureshi from Design It For Us.
Chairwoman Hinsdale and members of the Economic Development Committee, thank you for inviting me to express my support for the Vermont Kids Code ahead of the opposition you will hear today. My name is Leman Qureshi. I'm a senior at American University in Washington, D.C., and I'm from Illinois. I'm the co-chair of Design It For Us, a coalition of youth activists from across the country driving state and federal policy to protect kids and teens online. I co-founded the organization this March, but we have already made an impact. In 2022, the then Design It For Us campaign successfully advocated for the California Kids Code, which passed the California State Legislature unanimously and was signed into law. This year, Design It For Us has supported the introduction of the Kids Code in Maryland, Minnesota, Vermont, Illinois, and others, and we have supported a trio of federal bills in Congress dedicated to holding social media giants accountable. The Vermont Kids Code is the first step to holding big tech accountable. Under the code, companies must set all defaults to the strictest privacy settings, design products for the safest experience for kids, stop tracking kids without notice, stop using kids' data to target detrimental material to them, and provide privacy tools for kids to take agency over their digital experience. These compliance measures put the onus on big tech, not on kids or their parents, to do what they should have done years ago and design their products for us. Today, you will hear from industry trade groups, paid for and fully funded by big tech, who will say that this bill is well-intentioned but presents challenges. In our experience, these trade organizations are not engaging to improve the bill or seek input for a successful passage. They are here to stop its progress. Before you listen to their testimony, I would like to take some time to address what you will hear from them today. Big tech will say this is going to break the internet and that the bill requirements are unclear and they simply cannot comply. But these are fear-mongering tactics. This kind of tech reform is currently law in the United Kingdom, and last I checked, the internet is not broken. Big tech will say that the Kids Code violates parental rights because parents want to take responsibility themselves. In reality, parents and kids are begging for help, supporting young people online. A Washington Post report claimed that by the end of 2022, fewer than 10% of teens on Meta's Instagram had enabled the parental supervision settings. And a recent poll reports that 87% of the electorate believes that it is important for the government to take action to combat the harms being caused by social media platforms. We know that parents need and want safer tech products to protect kids. This is not a replacement for parental responsibility, but a digital seatbelt supporting responsible parenting in the digital age.
Digital seatbelt. Love stealing that.
That is really good.
Clearly spoken to Congress.
Big tech will say that this bill violates the First Amendment, as shown in the California AADC lawsuit brought by NetChoice, a tech industry group. The Vermont Kids Code upholds free speech by focusing on platform designs and algorithms, not content removal to mitigate harms, steering clear of regulating speech. There is no content moderation regime established in this bill. Opponents of this bill are trying to conflate regulating data, privacy, and design with speech and content moderation, intentionally creating confusion and alarm. But the Vermont Kids Code specifically regulates data management practices and product design. It does not regulate protected speech under the First Amendment because it does not target content or require technology companies to moderate content differently. It is not content-based regulation. Ultimately, we believe that big tech must be responsible for its products, like its algorithms and addictive features, and the Kids Code does just that. Big tech will say that this bill is going to be worse for privacy, that it will require mandatory facial recognition, ID checks, or other forms of age verification. They will try to convince you that it is more privacy invasive, but that is simply false. This bill does not mandate any form of age or identity verification. Companies already make age approximations of users based on the data that they collect on us. Big tech will try and convince you that this bill is going to be harmful for the LGBTQ plus community and minority children. They're trying to stoke fear based on false information. This bill allows children of all identities to safely access age-appropriate information and essential resources. The bill includes explicit anti-discrimination language that expressly prohibits big tech from making any design choice that discriminates against a child based on race, religion, national origin, disability, gender, and/or sexual orientation. The Kids Code's strongest privacy protections are important for LGBTQ plus youth, who receive more frequent recommendations to friend or follow strangers on social media. Stronger default privacy settings and better data protection fosters an online environment for everyone to safely grow, explore, and express themselves. Big tech will try to persuade you to believe that this bill is going to harm innovation and business, but in reality, we know that smart regulation spurs innovation by incentivizing companies to proactively address risks and develop safer, more ethical products from the outset. Finally, big tech will point you towards other piecemeal solutions that fail to target its business model, instead suggesting that classrooms should better educate younger users on the harm and law enforcement should play a greater role. While I agree that improving discussion in schools around these issues is necessary, teachers and schools have no power to turn off addictive features and harmful algorithms by default. The Kids Code does just that, and the Vermont legislature should pass this bill and sign this into law. I hope you will find my perspective to be helpful as you listen to the next round of testimony. I look forward to answering any questions you have and discussing this further. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Simone. Very helpful. Any question?
No, but we're gonna steal that digital seatbelt. That's pretty fabulous.
Glad it was helpful.
Yes. Well, thank you for
Can
taking
you-
that.
Can you remind us, so you're in college now
Yes.
and Design It For Us has, like, is it membership? Is it a group of young people who found each other?
Yeah, it's a coalition of youth activists from across the country. So we really came together to address the online harms that our generation was experiencing and advocate for ourselves. It really came about because a lot of the policy that we saw in 2022 that was being developed to protect kids and teens online really wasn't taking into account the youth perspective. And so that's why Design It For Us came forward to advocate for ourselves, to share our lived experience and perspective and offer why we think policy reforms are smart and necessary to protect our generation and ultimately the next generation.
Absolutely. Senator Clarkson, and that's.
I just want to build on Keisha's question, which is, how many are you? How many chapters do you have, or how many people? What does Design It For Us look like nationwide?
Yeah, we have about 100 activists within our network. We have a number of organizations that we partner with across the country. We've only been around for under a year, so we are still growing. But I will say that as we've grown, we have gotten in contact with more and more young people from around the country who care about this issue, who want to speak up about it. I'll say that I was connected to somebody that I knew, a college student, who ultimately talked about their boss in the Vermont legislature wanting to do an AADC Kids Code bill. And so that's how we helped them support on that. And that's the power of the youth movement across the country right now, is that we can drive change and we will continue to drive change.
That's great. Senator Harrison.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here and for your testimony. And this bill is very exciting, in my opinion, very necessary. And it's not going to be the last thing we do or the last thing that's necessary, because obviously technology is changing constantly. So please just keep in touch with us. And if you have suggestions or if you see things in other states that have more of a permanent change model, some sort of requirement to update
Right.
codes and update how we regulate. Because I think we can't just do this and
Right,
then expect
right.
everything to be
Yeah.
fine. It won't.
At least this sets a
But
foundation.
no,
of
no, this is
possibility.
wonderful.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
hear
just-
you. Yeah, how do we
No.
make sure it's working?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And no, I'm sorry, go ahead. Thank
No,
you.
absolutely. I mean, I think as you alluded to, technology is changing so rapidly. I think the theory of change with this bill and this movement is that it really does take a village. And so in order to hold these technology companies accountable, if more states can adopt kids codes like this, more states can adopt age appropriate experiences, mandatory requirements for technology companies, we will set a standard across the country, whether the United States Congress acts or not, to protect kids and teens online. But we can't just sit around and wait and watch. And I'm grateful that all of you are taking this action and taking this upon yourself to protect us.
Right. And I said this to Adam, but I'm a huge fan of some of the thinkers in the UK around this and around gov.uk. Like they have so many principles for how the internet should work for people, 18-point font and no more than 2 scrolls, that, just like they really go back to people and say kind of is the internet working for you in a way that we don't. So
It would be great to
Yeah.
have that built in somehow, that kind of check-in.
Right.
yeah, maybe we'll see if there's like a UK person we talk to.
That'd be great. And then something just that I've always wanted or have wanted for years is a way to delete your data. Or have there be a regular, say,
Mhm.
6-month interval,
Yeah.
which all of your data is deleted.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, but then you won't have all your
Right.
links. But some people are willing to forego the convenience to know that your data is actually deleted.
Yeah, Zaman might have an answer, and we're about to get a data privacy bill, and we want to make sure these are harmonized
Mm.
too, and can delve deeper there as well. It's not going to be a one bill,
Right.
and even the Senate Education Committee is looking at a no phones, in schools policy. So it's kind of all of the above.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'll just say on that, I think privacy is desperately needed as a federal regime across the country, but you will be told, by the next panelists and by folks after this that that's a substitute for the measures that you all are drawing up. We can do both. We do need
Oh.
age-appropriate protection experiences for young people, and we can do privacy. I think the past couple of years have shown us California is a great model for what has happened so far. I completely agree that having a privacy regime is necessary. I'm obviously, not here to advocate for that, but if there's something that you all are working on, we're happy to partner with you on and work with you on in the future.
Thanks. Saman, anything you want to add from your personal experience, or what you hope the next generation has that you didn't?
Yeah, I'll just speak to what you alluded to about the experiences of young people in the UK right now. I think young people in the UK are already experiencing a safer online environment. The new requirements that went into effect in the European Union also help European teens have a safer experience online. None of those protections exist in the United States right now. And so when you talked about like fonts and harmful nudges and addictive features, this is what this bill aims to tackle. This is what's being used to take advantage of young people's mental health and their time, because they're constantly having to scroll on feeds that they don't feel like they have any control over. The thing that I hear the most from people is, and I'm sure as you've gone through this, you've heard testimony, across the board, you've heard really harmful and horrible experiences of young people who've had harms on the platform. I will say that in our experience, there's a large majority of young people across the country in the United States who simply just want to get off their phones for a little bit longer than they can, who are on Instagram and say, I don't really want to be on Instagram, but I'm spending all this time on Instagram. So if we can build in safeguards that allow a little bit more agency for young people to take control over their digital lives, I think that's a net benefit to everyone, regardless of how extreme or how extreme the harms are that you've experienced.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Simone. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And we will stay in touch. It'd be great to see how your organization grows and connect you with young people here, like you said, who want to help advocate. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And you're welcome to stay and listen in. Amy, hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So we'll just have you take the witness chair here. And introduce yourself for the record. Was there a period of time you wanted to kind of speak uninterrupted, and then we'll go into questions?
That works.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, members of the committee. My name is Amy Boss. I'm the Director of State and Federal Affairs at NetChoice. We're a trade association made up of leading internet businesses, and our mission is really to make the internet safe for free expression and free enterprise. This is a discussion we've been having with lawmakers around the country, and it's a really important discussion. And we do want to be helpful in this process. You're going to hear me say it runs into constitutional concerns in flagging various aspects, but I sincerely mean that. It's like I said, we've been meeting with lawmakers about this issue for several months. Our members have taken issues of teen safety seriously in recent years. They've rolled out a number of new features, settings, parental tools, and protections to better empower parents. We ask, however, that you don't support this bill because we believe it is fundamentally flawed from a legal and policy perspective. We know that this law is unconstitutional. We've seen this decided by California and most recently in Ohio and in Arkansas. This legislation largely mirrors California's age appropriate design code. It was passed in 2022, which in turn is based on the British appropriate design code. I will just mention the UK, that is not an enforceable law, that is regulatory guidance, so there are some distinctions there. We also don't have the First Amendment.
Can you, sorry,
Yeah, of course.
if you're able to
No, please.
clarify question. What exactly happened in Ohio and Arkansas?
Yes, so the judge granted preliminary injunctions. In California specifically, the court reviewed.
We're more familiar with California.
Oh, okay.
So Ohio and Arkansas.
Yes, so those have they're similar. They're a little more strict with age verification, but those were
Okay.
both struck down. Ohio is not appealing. Arkansas is not appealing.
Okay, so their legislatures passed age verification laws.
Yes, age verification, parental consent. It includes provisions about privacy as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, those were both struck down, and like I said, this is
Okay,
not appealing.
okay. I just wasn't sure.
Absolutely. So we believe Vermont's AADC would likely run afoul of the First Amendment as well, due to its strong inducement for online platforms to over-censor content in order to avoid being penalized under the law's vague concept of what might be harmful to minors. So under the legislation, every digital service is required to file a data protection impact assessment before introducing a new service that minors might conceivably access. This requires them to list even hypothetical risks of material detriment to children and to mitigate or eliminate the risk before the online product is made available. Many of these terms really are in the eye of the beholder. Under the threat of fines, massive fines for misjudging what may be considered potentially harmful to children, platforms would certainly default to taking down all content on entire subjects, which is likely to remove beneficial, constitutionally protected material along with anything genuinely harmful. Make no mistake, we are talking about government banning speech. This is why newspapers have really gotten into this discussion as well. New York Times, Boston Globe sided with NetChoice in our case against California's anti-speech law. So while this is being framed as tech, just about tech, a lot of other organizations, websites, news organizations have weighed in as well. We believe that this legislation would force sites to erect barriers for children and adults alike. Regulated businesses would be required to estimate the age of their users with a reasonable level of certainty appropriate to the risks that arise from the data management practices. Or in the alternative, they must apply those privacy and data protections to all consumers. So in other words, businesses must choose between assuring the age of users, both minors and adults alike, or redesigning all of their online features to treat the adults as if they are children. One of the errors we think in this legislation too, I mean, taking a look at this bill, parents is mentioned once in the legislation. Vague terms like reasonable, I think I counted 52. So we believe that there needs to be better balance there. I'm glad to hear you say this isn't the only legislation that you're working on. We believe that there are some better approaches out there, rather than banning free speech of Vermont residents. So as I mentioned, we are working with lawmakers to achieve those ends. This includes requiring digital education in schools. We are working with lawmakers to update child abuse laws. I think a shocking statistics that we have found is that less than 1% of all reports of child abuse are even investigated. So our member companies report 32 million pieces of child abuse, CSAM, to NCMEC every year. And that means that 99% of reports of child abuse are going unheard. So we do also support legislation giving law enforcement resources to put these bad actors behind bars and really get to the root of the problem. So just in conclusion, we believe that this is a constitutionally flawed bill. The law is extremely vague for even the most conscientious online service to comply with. So we ask that you support the legislation.
Senator Cummings.
Free speech is not an unlimited right. You don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded building.
They have gone back. That's not respectfully. The court has said that has been misinterpreted. They've also stressed that young people as well have First Amendment right to. There's no age limit on the First Amendment. So there are some.
So you're saying that you can say anything to anyone at any time, regardless of any inherent. I'm trying to find.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
the court has
find your
used the
ethical
term-
core here. Where is the
Yeah.
ethical core?
The term that I think the court is using in.
I don't care what the court says. I want to know your industry.
Yeah,
Where is your ethical core? Where is the point at which you say enough is enough? We're making enough progress and too many children are being harmed.
I don't think they've ever said enough. I think they've always said that we have to do better. And that is why they haven't stopped just with certain parental tools. I think they're constantly innovating. This is being demanded by parents a lot of the time, and I think industry needs to respond. And one of the things that we've told our member companies is parents need to know how to use these parental controls. It can't be complicated. It can't be time consuming. Many are working while raising their children. So this has to be easy. But the issue for us as an industry, and we're limited government. So, there is a concern with the state coming in and making certain default decisions and taking that right away from parents as well.
So how many kids have to die before somebody says something has to be done? We're hearing, and it's not an uncommon occurrence, even here in Vermont, to hear about children. We have a property tax crisis here. We're about to price ourselves out of the market. And one of the big causes is you have to have mental health and depression counselors, like 10 of them in any school. My kids went to school in the 90s. There was no depression. There was no, this has all come on with the internet. And at what point can you do whatever you want and we can't do anything
I
about it?
argue that one, in mental health, we are seeing an increase in the past 2-3 years. I think COVID plays a role with that. I think
Yes,
there's
they
been a
got shut
study.
up with their phones for 2 years.
There's been studies about kids watching the news and climate change and being worried about that. There's There's studies, I think,
I
just,
was
yeah.
brought up where we climbed under our desk and put our hands over our heads
Yeah.
because we were in danger of a nuclear attack. Okay, I lived 3 miles from the Grumman Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We were the #1 atomic target. We didn't grow up
Yeah.
with having to have depression counselors in our schools.
I guess to blame it entirely social media, I would argue probably against. Does social media have a role in some kids' mental health? Probably, and I think I welcome further studies. I think incorporating young people in this discussion is fantastic. We've talked to kids on both sides of the issue. A lot of kids find the internet and communities of being connected as well, and that it's been positive for their mental health. It affects people differently. It's a hard issue to tackle, but the internet and social media affects people very differently sometimes. And I'd love to learn more too.
Senator Clark.
Thank you, Amy. Have you submitted your testimony electronically to
Yes.
Magali? Great. I guess one of my concerns in your testimony is I think you're suggesting that the parents have tools and that the parents need to be the gatekeepers, and I think that's a challenge.
Yeah.
I think that parents and children already have enough things to tussle over. I think that is really putting parents in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
I would not, I mean, that's sadly currently the way it is at the moment, although there are some other opportunities for control, but this is not controlling content. My understanding is this is controlling access. And so,
There's no banning of speech.
there's no banning of speech. And so access is the issue. And I think that's where your testimony is suggesting parents need to be the gatekeepers. I really have a hard time with that.
Yeah, and that, I think they have to have a greater role. Like I said, I think parent was mentioned once in this legislation.
But you said Ohio struck down a bill that seemed to mention parents more.
Yes, it's slightly different in that it would require, yes, parental consent to establish social media accounts.
So did you support a bill that had more parental involvement?
We would support legislation.
Did
that
you support
would
the
better-
Ohio bill?
We did not.
Why?
Because we still believe that takes the certain rights away from parents. So
I thought it was a parental consent.
it is, parental consent. You can have parental consent right now. Parents can say, I don't support putting that app on your phone. I don't mean to say that it's easy. It's incredibly hard. I don't have children myself,
Okay.
but I have nieces and nephews
Uh-huh.
who spend time on social media as well, and I want them to learn how to navigate the internet safely. Because I don't think it's going away. I think there needs to be barriers and protections, but it's
How do you
where
think
the
they should
state
learn that?
comes in and where the parents comes in. I think through I was reading about financial literacy courses now are in 35 states, and it's teaching people how to manage money correctly. And
But like, I don't know
think
how
there
to
is-
use TikTok, so how am I supposed to teach my child how to use TikTok?
So under legislation, so like Florida and Virginia recently passed such legislation. It would require stakeholders in the Department of Education to come together to provide established curriculum to.
I thought you said you don't want more government involvement.
But that is incorporating parents too into discussion. There's no mandate, it's teaching.
What would they be
people how to-
teaching them?
Teaching how to use the internet safely. So,
What tools would they access to do that?
so certain flags, certain websites, to be cautious about. If you're getting DMs, maybe warning signs of how to block and how to use some of these tools as well, so they can, they don't get unwanted messages from strangers.
Senator Kelly.
Telling a teenager that this is a bad site for you to look at is like waving a red flag. The first thing they're gonna wanna know is, what are you trying to keep me from finding out?
Teaching kids, of course, they're not always going to take everything that they're taught, and if that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish here, I don't think we can ever accomplish that, right?
Senator Harrison.
Yeah, just the issue that we're working on here is the actual code.
Yeah.
So parents are not going to have the ability to change the code on any website. Like the infinite scroll, the
Algorithms.
right, and just the companies know about dopamine and how it's triggered and how once you post something, like the next 15 minutes, you're especially waiting to see how many people have responded, how many likes you get. I mean, that's the product is people's time, and what they're selling is folks' attention. And parents are never going to be able to say, you know, I'm going to get in there and change that code. I mean, that's just not going to happen. It can't happen. They won't let you change their code. They have rules on that too.
Yeah, I mean, at first, for any business, I think that's what any business is trying to do is get your attention and.
Well, some
want
businesses
stores
actually
Want you to stay in the
want to
store.
sell you things that you need, you know, like shoes. But and some internet companies sell shoes. There's only a certain amount of shoes people buy. But the advertisers they want that attention from the kids, and the kids, you know, brains are different than adults, and they're just taking advantage of it. And I cannot see how a parent could cope with that on their own
Yeah.
and change their child's.
Happy to continue those,
Well,
those
I mean-
discussions. I mean, it's concerning when I hear the Constitution doesn't matter. That's
I don't
not
think
where we're
anyone's saying that.
coming from.
No one's saying that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. Constitution
No
matters.
one's even banning speech. We're talking about censoring speech.
No, but it's
Not
but it's
in this
harm.
bill.
Harm
Yeah.
to children
This
is
bill
being.
about
Yeah.
access and
Right.
coding. It's not about.
People to sell all kinds of things to children. You can't sell them alcohol, you can't sell them prescription drugs. They can't drive cars until they're a certain age. There's a recognition that as you grow, you gain abilities and experience. And you don't put a 3-year-old in a pickup truck and say, go for it. And that's, I think, what we're trying to get is that regulated sense of what a child can handle, can understand.
I agree with the premise, everything that you're saying. It's just, from a limited government aspect, whether that is best done by the states or best done by parents is just what I'm grappling
Okay,
with.
your only solution was involving the Department of Education, so I'm not hearing a limited government solution where your
We
members
need to-
are
Yeah.
doing more. So first of all, I would like to know, who are your members?
So we have 40 members that all listed right, I think, on the first page of our website.
Okay.
We have large, small.
Who are your large members?
Large members include Amazon, Amazon, Google, Apple.
So Meta is not a member.
Meta is, nope, that's not exclusive. Again, please feel free to go to our
So
website.
Meta has sent a different lobbyist to tell us that they are neutral.
Yes, so
Did we hold your membership on who is neutral on this bill and who's not?
we are principled first, so we do not go to our members and ask if that is okay for us to support or oppose legislation. We're principles first, and that we believe in limited government.
But do they tell you that they're neutral?
I don't know what they told our company and their job.
You're the director of local and state affairs,
Yeah.
Did you know that Meta was neutral on this?
It doesn't surprise me that they're neutral
Okay.
on this.
So who, when you talk about social media and speech, who is your client that you're representing right now?
I'm not representing a client, I'm representing Net Choice. And I know that I don't need to
Who, what
Make that
other social
confusing.
media platforms are your members besides Meta?
eBay, Etsy,
So
or
are those considered social media?
I think how.
Okay.
How.
So for you, it's just, did the bill worry you about Etsy?
I don't think this bill is just directed for social media.
No.
I don't- oh, okay.
But no, I'm not concerned about Etsy in this bill. What in this bill makes you concerned that Etsy will have to limit speech now?
I'm not concerned about it. I'm again just talking about my concerns as it relates.
Could you
to
share what other
access.
social, I think social media is considered different than Etsy and eBay.
Things as opposed to.
I think it depends, various states have different definitions.
You do
I
have
know
an
that
age requirement
if
to
you-
go purchase something on.
If you
eBay.
listen to the
Yeah.
Supreme Court oral
And
arguments
there's
yesterday,
can't mark
they
stuff.
said that Etsy, I mean, they certainly raised Etsy in regards to social media, so I think it just kind of,
Okay, what other organizations more similar to Meta do you represent?
I can pull up our website,
Great.
we have TikTok.
Oh,
We
okay,
have-
that didn't come to mind.
Okay.
When you were talking about the social media organization.
Yeah,
you represent
if this
TikTok.
bill wants to narrowly, I
Can
mean,
you say the other ones, please? Do you represent X?
yes,
Okay, so why would you go to Etsy and eBay first instead of
We
X
did-
and TikTok?
we didn't go to any of our member companies.
No, I mean, when you said,
Oh.
when you said we represent eBay and Etsy, why would you mention those before TikTok and X in relation to a bill about social media platforms and teenagers?
I think it was just in response to who we represent, that was my only intention.
Why don't you continue going through the list of the people that you actually represent?
Airbnb, Amazon, Apple, eBay, Etsy, Expedia, Meta, Fluid Truck, Google, Offra, Nextdoor, PayPal, Pinterest, Pindrop, Snap, StubHub, TikTok, Turo, Twitter, VeriSign, Waymo, Verizon. I don't think I'm leaving anyone off. It's not my intention.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
So of your members that lean toward the X, TikTok, Meta variety, does your organization have conversations with them about how much screen time they do consider healthy for young people?
We have lots of conversations around kids' online safety, and I imagine, yes, that includes screen time.
So you, as the director of state and federal affairs for NetChoice, don't have a sense of what they consider a healthy amount of screen time for kids.
I don't know if there's an established healthy amount. I don't know if anyone knows that number.
Do you talk to pediatricians who are involved in your organization or have a perspective on how we should make
I
the
don't-
increase,
I'm
but
trying to
also keep
recall-
it healthy?
The US Surgeon General came out with a study on social media use. I think the American Pediatric Society also came out with a
Mhm.
study as well. I don't know if they include specific numbers.
So without the government getting involved, do your organizations try and create nudges?
Yes.
Like what?
Specifically nudges, what, after 30 minutes, you get a reminder, hey, I'm paraphrasing.
Which apps do that? Which platforms do that?
I know Instagram, I don't have,
And that's if you build it in. Mine doesn't do
it's
that.
available.
It's available. So why would it be a problem if that was automatic?
Not a problem. If
Then
the
why isn't
company,
it automatic?
if the company wants to do it automatically, I think that's great.
Wouldn't
The
we
demand is
want
there.
That
the state-
to happen because we believe it's healthier for kids.
That's a problem for, the courts have a problem with that. And
But
I'm
so
just
we're leaving it
delivering a
up to
message.
Instagram to decide that it's healthy for our kids
no,
only if they set
it
that
shouldn't be up
feature.
to companies what is healthy for kids at all.
That's what you just said.
It should be up to parents. So the companies make those tools available, but it's up to parent. Again, it affects kids very differently. One child, I have a 16-year-old niece, she handles social media extremely well. She has very different rules from my sister than my 13-year-old. So that
Your
is
13-year-old.
my 13-year-old niece, sorry.
Okay. What outcomes do you see your social media clients wanting to change to help kids be healthier?
What outcomes?
Yeah, when they look at statistics about depression and eating disorders and even time
Yeah.
spent online, what do they talk about wanting to change? If your clients were in the room, what would they say they would like to see?
You're not going to like this answer. I can't, each one is very.
So what
different.
would you like to see for kids?
Yeah, I think it's incredible, the tools that have been released in the past 2 years. I don't know if you've seen the commercials, if you go. on
Isn't
your
a lot of that
phone-
related to the UK's legislation?
I don't think so, no.
Can you point something out that wasn't in response to the UK's legislation that is a really helpful feature?
Here.
Yeah, that's available here.
I don't know the exact timing. of
Tell me your
when-
favorite feature
I think,
that makes kids healthier.
I think either, nudges or the limiting screen time or the parent taking the phone away from the child.
So your
Actually, that's
favorite
probably my
advancement
Is picked.
is parents taking their child's phone away.
I think that is the ultimate, at the end of the day, parents have that responsibility.
That is just not an answer to my question. I asked the question, what are your clients doing to give kids a healthier experience online that you're really proud of?
I'm
That's a good
not-
question.
I think that's their story to tell. If you're meeting with
Well,
TikTok
Meta's
and you're
neutral.
meeting with Meta,
Yeah.
then I think that's
So
their
what
story
what
to
does
tell.
what does your 16-year-old niece use
For parental controls.
for making herself healthier on social media
She
platforms?
used,
Self moderating.
yeah, so she's in soccer, so she is involved in various soccer groups and media online. She uses Instagram, she's posting videos of her soccer games and she's found that community.
Do you believe
Sure.
there's a healthy amount of screen time for a teenager per day?
I think that depends on the teenager.
Really?
Or do you think there's an unhealthy amount?
Probably. I don't know. Again, it's probably up to the teenager, for how much time they should or should not be spending on social media. I know schools have often incorporated computers and phones and social media into use in the classroom. So, I think there's concern there, whether you're limiting access as well. I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't about me, this isn't about our member companies. We're urging you to make sure that you don't go down the same path as laws that have been struck down, because laws that are unconstitutional don't help anyone. They don't protect a single tribe. So that's where I have an issue with, is going down the path of an unconstitutional law.
That's
Where in a
for
year or two,
us to
it could
determine.
be,
So, and that's for, not even that,
Sure,
sure, courts to determine. I guess what I'm really asking is, I mean, we're lawmakers, right?
Yeah.
So if we say there's an addictive substance out there, we don't say, parents, it's your responsibility to just grab it from your children. That's our legal answer. So what you're asking us to do is take something that's scientifically, but you talked about the Society of Pediatrics, you talked about the Surgeon General, you've talked about people who recognize that there's addictive properties of these tools and these products. And we have never in the history of looking at something that's very harmful to children said, our legal answer is parents take it away.
but those studies have also said social media is inherently harmful to children. So, we can pick certain things from these studies, but, yeah.
But you're saying, you're acknowledging that they do say it's addictive.
I think I'd have to go back and looking at the study.
Which study are you talking about?
So both the US Surgeon General and the American Psychological Association, both published studies, I believe both were done last year. And it's a mixed bag, right? So they outline recommendations to lawmakers, they outline recommendations to parents, and they outline recommendations to government. And so it has kind of, charging orders, I think, for all parties involved.
Do you believe that advertising should give people accurate information?
I do.
Okay. And so what are these social media platforms selling advertisers?
So I think when we're getting into privacy and advertising,
Yeah.
I mean, we are extremely supportive of, I mean, not only a national privacy law.
Mhm.
I've been taking a look at the Vermont privacy law as
Mhm.
well. Obviously, we'd love for Congress to pass something. I worked for a member of Congress. Don't hold your breath for Congress to pass something. So certainly understand states wanting to act.
So
There's
you do
certainly
support
privacy.
data privacy laws?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Hmm.
So. What with your, I'm kind of asking what your concern is with age banding. If it's pretty obvious that advertisers pay for the attention of and information about certain age groups. I mean, that's already, they're not, advertising products for 60-year-olds to 15-year-olds. So the information is within the algorithm of what age someone is.
Age banding, was that the question? What my concern with?
Yeah, you mentioned you had concerns about age verification and things like that.
Yeah.
Do your clients not know the age of the people on their platforms?
I think so they certainly do estimate some age.
Mm-hmm.
When you're under the threat of massive fines, you're not going to make just an estimate and best guess. You're gonna want to know who that person is, whether they are under 18. So,
Well,
yes,
I mean, you're doing state and federal policy.
Yeah.
We ask people all the time to make their best guess, right? So we have a sports betting law in Vermont, and we don't want them to advertise to young people under 21.
Yeah.
So they have to make their best guess that they're not going through your companies and advertising to under 21-year-olds.
sure.
They are not supposed to, be flyering college campuses, et cetera. So that's a good faith effort to follow the law. And they're also relying on your same clients to tell them that they're doing their best job, not advertising to under 21-year-olds.
Sure.
So
Yeah, if it was something like that, I'm doing your best job or something like that, I think that
we don't mind doing your best.
Yeah, I know.
To the law.
I know.
But these
Of
are
course.
our legal standards.
Sure.
I mean, we do really give people the benefit of the doubt.
I think you're gonna see companies want to, again, if they're under threats of massive fines, they're going to want to know. So whether that's, uploading a.
But they're under threats of massive fines after something's been pointed out to them of concern, right?
Yes.
Under this bill, yes.
Yes. So you could say, show us more information about how you are trying to avoid this kind of, harm to young people. And that's a legal process that exists. We already have that, like I said, for sports betting and other kinds of advertising.
Is it kind of a check the box or?
No.
Okay,
No, because if a lot of parents all of a sudden called us and said,
right.
everywhere my child looks on the internet, they're seeing sports betting advertisements,
Yeah.
and that isn't happening with, another age category, it's happening on Roblox or whatever, we'd have.
I think if something is narrowly drafted such as that, I think it could withstand constitutional scrutiny. There's legislation out there right now that porn websites would have to age verify. Websites with a substantial amount of porn, which I believe is 33.3%, would have to age verify, check your ID or whatnot. And so I think if you're narrowly crafting something like that, I think that could withstand
But you don't
Constitutional
disagree that your platforms know people's ages.
They have.
I'm sure they have an estimate of people ages. Again, I think each one of our companies is probably different. So when you're having conversations with Meta, I think you might get different answers from different companies.
Can you share something from what has changed in the regulatory framework in the UK that you disagree with?
I'd have to look at the UK regulatory guidance. Again, it's guidance, it's not enforceable law. And they don't have the First Amendment that we have here. So to say that, I mean, to incorporate something from the UK to America, and it's easy, and companies are already doing it, I think there's other nuances, and complexities that also have to be considered in that aspect.
We.
Just
with
a
the
little
program,
follow-up.
Yeah.
So do your companies follow the guidance in the UK?
Some do.
So that would be, you'd be able to get us your opinion. Or their
And we-
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we asked for some information that you didn't have today.
Yeah.
If you could go back and watch the tape and
Sure.
share the specific studies you're referencing, share answers that are, a little more concrete. That would be helpful.
Okay, I will share those two studies.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, what specific question can I come?
If I would really like to know if any of your members are not following something here that they're following in the UK and that your organization has a problem with.
Okay.
Liza, Zoe, anybody want to ask a question? Oh, we have you.
Actually, I have another.
Yeah.
So, it is I just to take a note, when you said you support data privacy
Yeah.
laws, that's really good news. So any information you can provide on what your clients do for data privacy would be wonderful. I know that's probably a big list. So, but I'm just interested, and I think we would all be interested in knowing that.
Okay,
Cause I feel like there's no privacy, or
okay,
very minimal privacy, is
Yeah.
my experience as a customer.
okay.
Yeah, and then, so you just want to state your name for the record. Okay.
Hi, I'm Zoe Moy, I'm Keisha's intern.
Zoe.
I'm a high school student, but
Junior captain of the CBU debate.
hello. I was just wondering, this might be a little bit broad, but you did say like the best protections would be parental controls, but not all children, especially high school students, have like close relationships with their parents or parents that have the time and even like money and ability to spend a lot of time monitoring the controls. So how would that protect children who maybe don't have the access to a family like that?
Yeah, that's unfortunate, to hear. Well, I was at a hearing a few weeks ago when it was a child in, the child welfare system too, who didn't have a parent of the state was their parent, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think to get at the root of the problem, just like everybody is not going to have a loving parent to help guide them, you could also turn it around and say, maybe I'm a young person, I have very different viewpoints than my parents. I want to access information that maybe my parents wouldn't allow me. Maybe they are, conservative and, doesn't want their child to learn, about, a progressive meeting, next week or whatever. So it's not always going to be perfect. And I would go back to, kids do have a First Amendment right, and to cut off. We're probably gonna argue about whether this is content and speech, or not, but we believe that the Constitution is on our side. The judge in California said that this was content. The New York Times, the Boston Globe, certainly not always, friendly to tech. They believe this is content and speech, and so
And I just want to clarify for anyone listening, we are going to have media organizations come in with language to make sure that true journalistic media organizations are not captured under this bill. So I think that would undercut involving the invoking the name of the New York Times, where we want freedom of the press as well.
Sure, okay, that's okay.
And they're not your client. Liza, is there anything?
No, I just have more comments than
Just
questions,
introduce
so I'll
yourself,
wait.
right.
Yeah, so
Introduce
Yeah.
yourself for the record.
My name's Liza Earl Centers, and I'm just here as a concerned parent, so definitely interested and have the parent response to some of the things you said, but not questions specific.
yes, and we have you last to testify, so we're glad you're here listening and taking notes.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Boz.
It's very
I'm going to paraphrase back what I heard, which is that our best answer is to have parents take their children's phones away.
I think there are constitutional ways that we can address a lot of your concerns.
But you're not.
Okay,
You're not, right?
I have a few,
You couldn't name a specific one.
the Kids Invest in Safety Act is a federal piece of legislation we very much support.
Senator Cook.
I'm just rethinking here. If the solution is parents take kids' phones away and kids have a right to free speech and to know anything they want to know, isn't taking their phones away inhibiting their free speech?
I don't think the court would find that.
You don't.
I don't.
But anything
Your parent, I mean,
to limit. I wish all children had two parents who were focused and able and understood how to shut off the things. And I am pretty sure that every time a parent shut something off, that there's a kid techie out there who can put it back on. It's here. We're allowed to sell alcohol in this country. I've got a constitutional right to drink, but I'll imprison anyone who sells alcohol to a minor. Or,
there's no constitutional protection for it, yes. At all.
but it's access. We don't allow children to
It's
have
access.
Well, you have
access.
access to the store, you don't have access to the beer. And I think that there are some distinctions, and if it's narrowly tailored.
What I'm saying is, we limit children's access to
Oh.
things that we as an adult see are doing them harm. Okay, there's a bill here that would allow inoculations for children, I think down to the age of 12, without parental consent. That's highly controversial, taking away parental consent, because some people don't like what parents are saying, especially when it comes to inoculations. And I don't. Yeah, there's something definitely going on with today's youth that wasn't going on 15, 20 years ago, before the advent of the internet. And we're not talking about free speech. We're talking about, I put out my best thing, and do you like me? And one of the responses we got, one of the students in here said was, I wish you'd drink bleach and die. That child did commit suicide.
Horrible.
Okay, so how do we prevent children, especially from being exposed to that?
And that can be
Deadly
done
speech.
online or offline. It's a horrible, horrible thing. I mean,
Right, but it's going on. It's really easy to say terrible things
Yeah.
when you are faceless and nameless and nobody can come back at you.
right.
If you stood up and said that in front of a class, half of your friends would probably beat you. There's an anonymity on the internet that allows people to say things that they would never say face to face.
There are pros and cons when it comes to anonymity too, though. A domestic violence, woman who wants to remain anonymous online. There are pros and cons.
Yeah.
I don't have the entire solutions. I don't think we need to unmask people on the internet. Yeah,
Senator
it's,
Brock, I'll let you go last and then
Right.
you. What is this?
Do any of your members try to retain their customers?
try to retain, yeah, I think with any business, they want to retain customers.
And do they have methods by which they do that in terms of creating content that's interesting to their customers?
I'm sure they do.
Do they have algorithms that try to do that by retaining their customers voluntarily, or for that matter, to impose ideas and conditions and methodologies that try to maintain them essentially at all costs?
Yes, they use algorithms. I think the companies use algorithms differently.
Do the
I don't
algorithms, for
represent-
example, are any of the algorithms, for example, directed at children?
I'm sure, I mean, algorithms are human made,
Sure.
so yeah, I.
But are they
assume-
designed, for example, to maintain the children who may be watching it and to keep them online?
I'm sure they continue to encourage engagement,
Advertise to them to the extent necessary.
probably.
And in some cases, might they keep them online for extended periods of time,
Yes,
designed so that a kid, for example, maybe 10, 11 years old, might be online indefinitely based on the way the algorithms are
I
structured?
think it's a very bad
Design.
idea for a 10-year-old to be online
And
indefinitely.
should anyone regulate that?
Should it, I think there's just an inherent difference whether the government should regulate that or
So
not.
if the government doesn't regulate it, you would assume that parents would regulate it?
Right. Yes, parents estate.
That is my hope.
And so should therefore, government simply ignore anything that happens, even if the addiction, if you will, results in adverse impact on children? Should we ignore that?
I don't think we need to ignore the studies. I think in fact, like I said, I would welcome additional studies.
Well, aside from studies though, what should we do about it, if anything? Or are
So
you
if-
suggesting that we do nothing?
Is the goal being protecting kids' mental well-being online? Is that?
Well, that should be
the
one of the
ultimate-
goals, and there may be other goals, but that should certainly be one of them.
Yeah, again, I would go back to our concern is that an unconstitutional law doesn't protect anyone. So whether it's waiting
What
for
would
the
be a
courts to forgive
constitutional
us.
law that might protect someone from what might be an imminent harm?
I think what we've seen with the Louisiana porn legislation, which I had mentioned,
Mhm.
that has not been struck down. The digital media literacy, I know that doesn't sound like we have fans here, but it has been working in Florida and Virginia. And then, we're big fans of the Kids Invest in Kids Safety Act at the federal level. Which hopefully put some teeth into some of the reports that social media companies make to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that are right now being thrown into garbage.
So, please also, if you have studies on the solutions that you're proposing that have led to better outcomes, you're
Okay.
welcome to send that as well.
She said she'd share those.
Yes, this Florida, we're very curious. I'm not saying we are dismissive,
Sure.
but I haven't heard you cite any statistics or resources that are specific enough about solutions that have moved the needle.
Okay, I don't know if there are studies that are ultimately like, this is the solution though either.
Right, but you were saying
yeah.
that it's been effective in Florida, and I don't know what you're basing that on.
Okay, got it. I
Right,
understood the
so we
question.
have, we try to, our integrity is based on
Sure.
being truthful in these spaces,
Sure.
you know, that if you don't have the data to show that they're effective, that it's not really valuable to say that.
Got
Thank you. So just to do a time check, I want to give 15 minutes to Liza at the end. You're welcome to stay in that chair, you don't have to if this feels too warm. Because I believe at least our next two witnesses are on Zoom. So Alex Spiropoulos from the Computer and Communications Industry Association. We have about 10 minutes total, so if you wanted to take 5 to speak, and then we'll do 5 minutes of questions.
Sure, that sounds good, and feel free to interrupt me as I give my testimony. So, good morning, Chair Hinsdale and members of the committee. My name is Alex Spiropoulos. I'm the Regional Policy Manager for the Northeast at the Computer and Communications Industry Association. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today and share our concerns with Senate Bill 289, an act relating to age-appropriate design code. I've also submitted lengthier written comments for the committee's consideration. CCIA is an international not-for-profit trade association representing a broad cross-section of communication and technology firms. Proposed regulations on the interstate provision of digital services therefore can have an impact on CCIA members. In recent sessions, there's been a notable surge in state legislation concerning children's online safety. Acknowledging policymakers' valid concerns about the online privacy of young individuals, it is imperative to prioritize the establishment of a comprehensive data privacy law applicable to all consumers, which we know your colleagues in the House are aiming to tackle this year. This law should incorporate safeguards for sensitive data, specifically addressing information commonly linked to younger users. CCI holds a firm conviction that children are entitled to a higher level of security and privacy in their online experiences. CCI's members have been leading the effort to implement settings and parental tools to individually tailor young users' online use to the content and services that are suited to their unique lived experiences and developmental needs. CCI appreciates the committee's intentions in tackling this important issue, but would like to flag several areas of concerns with proposed legislation. First and foremost, the bill lacks narrowly tailored definitions. As currently written, the bill defines a child as anyone under the age of 18. Due to the nuanced ways in which children under the age of 18 use the internet, it is imperative to appropriately tailor such treatment to respective age groups. For example, if a 16-year-old is conducting research for a school project, it is expected that they would come across, learn from, and discern from a wider array of materials than a 7-year-old on the internet playing video games. We suggest that the definition of changing the definition of a child to a user under the age of 13 to align with the federal's Children Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, as it's more commonly referred to. This would allow for those over the age of 13 who use the internet much differently than their younger peers to continue to benefit from its resources. Additionally, the definition of best interest of a child is incredibly vague and impossible to operationalize at scale, creating moving goalposts for compliance. The benefit of a dynamic marketplace is that online businesses can tailor their services and products to what is most relevant and useful to their specific audience. Private online businesses will not be able to coherently or consistently make diagnostic assessments of users, including what could be physically, financially, or emotionally harmful to them. Humans in general, especially children, have very nuanced opinions surrounding what may be harmful to them. The diverse lived experiences of children, teens, and adults vary significantly, leaving businesses without a comprehensive roadmap to navigate each user's unique perspective. Determining the optimal solution for the well-being of each and every young individual engaging with an online platform poses a serious feasibility challenge. Secondly, the bill's provision addressing the profiling of a child and the enforcement of penalties for violation pose significant questions regarding compliance. In order to achieve meaningful children's safety protections, it is imperative for businesses to have a roadmap of how to properly comply and avoid unintentional violations. This measure provides broad strokes of what is expected of businesses, but does not portend how businesses may achieve those objectives. Instead, businesses may be allowed to profile a child by default under certain circumstances. CCIA interprets this as necessitating businesses to distinguish users aged below and above 18. We recommend providing clarity on the procedures businesses should follow to determine the age of users online, specifically when profiling them as children. Without a proper mechanism in place, businesses may encounter challenges in accurately determining the age of each individual user, potentially resulting in unintended violations for which the business may be held liable. CCIA also cautions against conflating concepts regarding profiling or estimating the age of users. For example, when a website asks a user to make a self-attestation of their age, such as in a website for alcohol products, the owner of that website is not held liable if the user chooses to mischaracterize their identity. Similar self-attestation measures are currently in place for social media platforms and other digital services, and the burden is on the consumer to be forthcoming and honest about the age and birth date that they enter. This, however, would change under Senate Bill 289 if online services were to rely on self-attestation for estimates, but then be in turn held liable for mischaracterizations. This would unreasonably treat the businesses as the bad actor. To achieve compliance and avoid proposed penalties for violation, it is likely that the profiling or age estimation would effectively amount to age verification. Current commercially available facial recognition and other mechanisms that provide age estimation cannot sufficiently accomplish what lawmakers are expecting. The AADC proposed not to require age verification, but the definitions and policy itself are so vague that sites will have no choice but to implement some kind of age verification technology to achieve compliance. And unfortunately, Senate Bill 289's approach includes these same pitfalls. Such verification requirements then raise questions about potential conflicts with data minimization principles and other consumer data privacy protection measures. CCIA is concerned that this, yes.
Is this your last point? I didn't know if you wanted to take questions.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe you
I'm
don't.
happy to stop.
But
I'm happy to stop. And
Maybe
I've
touching on your key concern, the last key concerns you have.
Sure. Yeah. So I think similar to the points that Ms. Boss from MetChoice made, I think we have concerns about the constitutionality of the age appropriate design code. We've seen other states like California, Arkansas, Ohio, who have implemented similar measures, have been challenged in court. And obviously the judges have ruled and provided preliminary injunctions preventing those laws from going into effect. So I think we have concerns around that. And again, the point that Ms. Boss made is that an unconstitutional law doesn't end up protecting anybody. And instead, I think we've seen the House, your colleagues in the House are pursuing a comprehensive data privacy law based on the Connecticut data privacy framework. And my understanding is that, in fact, they may be doing it today in a conversation the committee is having later this afternoon, that they're updating that bill to include the additional protections and for children's online safety and privacy that Connecticut subsequently passed last year. So I would encourage the legislature to look towards that Connecticut model, which we, again, I think goes to some of the points that I was hearing in the earlier comments from committee members around, whether, the ability or how data is used on children, whether or not they're able to be served targeted advertisements, things of that nature, which I think can play, which are definitely involved and are a factor in some of the concerns that I hear the committee members making. So I've submitted all the comments, to the committee in written form. So happy to answer any questions after folks were able to review my full comments, and of course, happy to take questions in the interim.
Questions?
I guess you heard that our discussion with Amy. Would you agree that, that you'd prefer to have parents be the gatekeepers to the internet than actually coding access?
So I think that our issue with the legislation is that, again, it becomes very difficult to determine what is appropriate for any individual child or any individual user online. I'm not a parent, but I assume that many parents have very varying perspectives as to what content would be appropriate for their child. Some may say, I do want to restrict access to, UFC, MMA fighting because I think that's too violent. While other parents may say that might be appropriate for my child. Some may say, I don't want my child to have access to learning about, reproductive rights. While other parents may say they would be supportive of that measure. And so I think it becomes very difficult for companies to be in compliance with what in fact would be appropriate. You're making a
share misinformation, and nothing in this bill limits or censors content.
Right. We're only.
Do you have members in the UK? I mean, maybe you could share what concerns you that's happening in the UK, because I haven't seen that there's that 7-year-olds and 16-year-olds are treated the same way, or that what about the UK's policies and regulations around age appropriate coding do you disagree with?
So again, I would echo some of the points that were raised earlier around the UK's is a guidance. It's not actually enforceable law. And again, the United States is different from the United Kingdom in that we have the First Amendment. The United Kingdom does not have the First Amendment. So I think our concern is that if a website is forced to choose between verifying the age of all their users, which again is a constitutional question of whether that's even feasible or allowable, or they're going to be liable if a content is deemed inappropriate for a user, they may end up showing either no content at all, right? So you have like sort of the puppies versus the.
Right, we're not regulating content. The proposal is to regulate access.
And the mechanism by which people's attention are maintained.
Right, but the age appropriate design code goes beyond just applying to social media platforms. It applies to all online services. So this applies to Google, it besides to online e-commerce platforms. So it would inevitably encompass anyone who goes on their computer and wants to look something up. If Google then has to determine whether or not the user is able to receive a certain search result because of if the content is appropriate to it, or they'd be held liable.
Does that happen in the UK and the European Union?
I would have to double check. Again, I focus primarily on the Northeast states, so I'd have to double check with some of the numbers.
Largest members.
So I just pulled them up because based on the previous conversation. So I'm happy to list through all of them. Again, they're all listed on our website. We have, I'm happy to run through them if that's of interest. Amazon, Apple, Cloudflare, Deliveroo, Dish, eBay, Google, Intel, Intuit, Meta, Nord Security, Opera, Pinterest, Rakuten, Red Hat, Shopify, TexasNet, TSMC, Uber, Viagogo, Waymo, X, and Zebra. And sorry for that extensive list. I want to make sure I did not exclude anybody.
Right. So your members all operate in the UK?
Yeah.
Many of them?
I would presume many of them do, yes.
I just do find it surprising that that we have people who are trying to talk to us about policy who are unable at all to compare the policy outcomes of what we're talking about here to the policy outcomes of another country. where your companies operate. That's a little bit of, concern about who's before us.
Well,
But
and
Senator
there's
Cummings.
policy it seems to be working well.
Right, Senator Cummings.
Well, when we talk about social media, I'm not talking about eBay or
Right.
Amazon. Maybe kids can buy rat poison on Amazon, but
They probably get much stronger controls
I'm
because
sure
you don't
they
want your child to be able to buy, 1,000 shoelaces all
they
the
can
time.
also buy phones when their parents take away their phones. And it might help if we got a more limited term for what we mean by social media. I
Yeah,
don't mean PayPal. I don't, that was on.
right, yeah, no, I know, I
Actually,
think
they're
it's obvious.
money
but-
transfers and we're
Yeah.
working on that as
It's not
well.
Right.
a social website
But-
that's purchasing retail.
Right.
It's retail versus social.
Yeah, it's retail. But I'd like to know, we heard somebody, one of the students was here, said she was looking for a bathing suit. The next thing she knew, she got 27 advertisements for bikinis. I don't think they'd send that to me if I look for bathing suits online.
Oh, you think they have some notion of your age?
I'm pretty sure
For the
they
bathing
do.
suits you like.
I just know every time I buy something, all of a sudden they're popping up
Mhm.
all over the place, ads with the
Right.
same item or similar items. And that to me is what's interesting, is the social media. And I know if I set myself up with a blog and I did infomercials, the more hits I got, if you get a lot of hits, then you can get sponsors,
Mhm.
meaning advertisers. And so how that social media, I'm talking to my friends, I'm talking to a friend I just
Yeah.
made in, Sierra Lanka. How that gets tied up with the advertising.
Sure.
I don't think we're
yeah,
talking about selling things online. We're talking about profiling kids. A
Right.
lot of the damage is done in the social media.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, kids are in bad shape, a lot worse
Mhm.
than they were
Right.
3 years ago.
And I just want to note the Ad Council sent a letter of opposition. We asked them if they wanted to testify and they declined to testify.
Is that the national or Vermont? National. Okay. What
Um,
advertising?
Thank you, Alex.
I may just
I,
add,
yeah,
just to the senator's question or the point around profiling, I think that's why we are strongly supportive of a data privacy law that includes additional protections for children, modeled after the Connecticut model, which the House is taking up, because that gets to your point, Senator, about when you go online and you're searching for something and you purchase a bathing suit or any other product and you're receiving advertisements and you get sort of that, as you described it, a bombardment. If you pass a comprehensive data privacy law that allows or restricts the ability to provide targeted advertisements to minors, you would essentially remove that factor when you're navigating online spaces for young adults. And you would also have additional protections to sort of manage that for yourself as well as a everyday Vermont resident. So I think that's one of the things I think that we would sort of urge the legislature to look towards is that model that Connecticut has taken, which I know that the House is looking at, and I think they're going to be incorporating those protections for kids in their legislation in the coming
because
days.
we're getting that bill, you as an organization support that legislation.
Yeah, I testified a couple of weeks ago in front of the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee, sharing our support with the bill. I think we have some technical changes that we've shared with the committee around definitions to promote interoperability with some of the other state laws. But I think by large in part, we are supportive of comprehensive data privacy, including that model that the House is looking to take up.
Okay, I mean, I want to save us some time when we get that bill. That bill, as I understand, will include a private right of action. You support the bill as it's currently drafted and is likely to hit House floor?
So I think that's one of our areas of concern is the private right of action. I don't think that we're alone in sort of echoing the points that I think the concern around the private right of action is that we haven't seen any other comprehensive state privacy law pass that includes a private right of action. It also becomes overly burdensome for businesses when they can be constantly bombarded with frivolous lawsuit claims. Obviously, I know that's not the topic of the conversation today. Happy to follow up and not want to take more time in this conversation. So we don't support the
Okay.
private right action, but we support the framework that the bill is based off of, yes.
I want to go to Elaine and go, is it Elaine? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's actually Alon.
Alon, okay, thank you. And Alon, can you pronounce your last name for us too?
Sean Collins.
Sean Combs, okay. Mr. Sean Combs, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I mentioned, my name's Alon Sean Collins. I'm here on behalf of Chamber of Progress. Chamber of Progress is a left of center technology trade policy group. We do have a number of corporate partners that include companies like Apple, Google, and Snap, but our partners don't get a vote or veto over any of our positions or statements. We're definitely supportive of the aim of this bill and of keeping children safe online, and think this bill is well intentioned. But we worry about some unintended potential consequences with this bill. First, we worry that the bill could chill development of new products and features that could improve the safety for children. This bill requires any websites likely to be accessed by children to perform data protection impact assessments for new features and services. We think that because all websites could be accessed by a child and all websites carry a non-zero risk of harm to children, the requirement of assessments could chill internet services from developing new products and features. Second, we worry that the bill could lead to over-moderation of content. The bill has language about preventing the risk of children from experiencing physical or financial harm, psychological or emotional harm, without necessarily providing clear guidance about what that might entail. We would agree that these are important considerations. However, we worry that platforms would face difficult choices about what types of content to consider harmful, and would be stuck trying to predict what the Attorney General, who I believe is tasked with enforcement of the bill, might consider harmful to children. We would note that in other states where copies of this bill have popped up, we have often partnered with other organizations such as the ACLU or LGBT Tech to oppose bills similar to this due to this concern. Third, we do worry about the potential for an age verification requirement. With this runs counter to some of the principles my organization has on data minimization, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions for Alon? Alon, you said that the chamber isn't paid for by some of those organizations. We heard a lot of Silicon Valley organizations listed by the other two organizations. Do they pay for your organization's existence?
Yes, they do fund us, but they don't get a say in our corporate governance. So most trade associations, Google or Apple, they would get a vote or a veto over the policy positions, which is not the case in our organization.
Do you have a board?
Yes, we do have a board.
Is that board have no people from those funding organizations?
I would be happy to send you a list of folks on the board, but the board does not get the board is purely advisory. They don't get a vote or veto. And there are a number of folks on the board. Some are legislators, some are academics. They come from a variety of backgrounds.
Okay. Senator Harris.
Just a quick question, just in your testimony, you talk about that this could chill internet services from developing new products and features, even products and features that could materially benefit and improve safety for children. Do you have any examples of those products?
So I know Instagram has some parental controls that they've introduced over the past couple years. I think YouTube has some parental controls as well. And I think the worry here is linked to the other concern that I mentioned too about over moderation of content. I think our main worry is about how platforms would have to predict what enforcement from the Attorney General might look like.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess our worry is that the algorithms, the fundamental coding is the problem or part of the problem.
Right.
And that isn't being addressed. Do you see any changes in the philosophy and operations, how things are being coded?
Well, I'm not a computer coder myself, so I don't know how in depth of an answer I could give you, but I do know that generally speaking, when those services are implemented, the feeds of a user who they a parent might have parental controls implemented over their kid, the feed's going to look significantly different.
Are you a parent?
No, I am not.
So, I just have to point out, it is interesting that that's, all of the industry, witnesses are not parents, and none of them have had to deal with
It
what we
would
all
have
had
been,
to
it
deal
would have
with.
been smart for your organizations to send one
Parent.
parent to tell parents what to do.
Yeah, and that none of you appreciate that putting parents as the gatekeepers to this is really just a terrible idea. I mean, just terrible. It's just, that is fundamentally flawed.
Maybe we should have heard from children. with
Yes.
Firsthand experience.
Right, well, we have, yeah.
How I can get around my parents' things, because my friends.
Exactly.
Right, I mean, our first witness today was a youth activist who's asking these organizations
To do this.
to make this safer for their generation, and they're ignoring it.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Liza, Earl Center.
No.
Great. Thank you for being with us this whole time.
Yeah, sure. I have to say, I get a little emotional because it's really nice to hear a room full of senators trying to back up parents, because I think we feel sort of left to the wolves. The corporate wolves who have hired brain researchers to make the most addictive, apps, that are really perverse. They trigger our own body's chemicals, right? That dopamine in our brain, to create these addictive cycles. So I have two stepsons who are ages 17 and 19, and my own daughter, my husband here in Montpelier, she's 11. And we tried really hard to have good guidelines to engage in conversations, look at the apps that the kids were using. But even with all the best intentions, it was so hard. Their aunt gifted them smartphones at an earlier age than what we wanted. The other household where they share custody bought data plans for them. And then COVID hit, and that was the only way for them to socialize. In school, they'd have their laptops and their phones, and we'd say, "Why do you have your phones?" And they'd like, "We need them for this class online," and just all the limits went out the window during COVID. And that's a very shared experience among parents. Was we tried, and then all the limits went out. We have the means to invest in other activities, sports and theater. I just spent $60 on yarn for crochet for my daughter. I know that's an equity issue. There are parents who can't invest in all those other things, but we are working hard. And still, it's a constant battle. And like Senator Clarkson said, with teens, you have enough things that you're already battling about that sometimes you just have to let go, because the screens is a daily, multiple times a day battle. We still have held on to a certain hour of day. The phones come downstairs and get plugged in. My daughter doesn't have the cell phone yet. But we see other life enrichments lose appeal when they have that option. Really healthy options. I taught at Callis Elementary for 4 years, 5th and 6th grade. Kids loved reading. Like every 3 days, a kid would finish a book this big. I saw at a track race, one of the parents said, "Oh, is your son still reading so much?" And they said, "No, as soon as he got the phones, reading went out the window." We've tried to teach healthy self-control and not have super strict to the minute limits, but when it just gets out of hand, my husband will say, "Okay, no phones this weekend." And the kids push back. And then at the end of the day, this has happened, I think, 4 different instances. at the end of those days, snuggled up on the bed with their dad, and they say, "This has been the best day ever." Right? Like, we as a society need to be giving our youth the best day ever, day after day after day. I see, like, the risk of physical harm. My eldest stepson is the one who is completely addicted to his phone, now age 19. On a road trip, I saw him cross a parking lot of a very busy interstate service station. He did not look up once in that entire parking lot on his phone. He'll use it in the kitchen while he's cooking. He burns food. They prey upon our youth in really perverse ways. It seems like this committee is pretty well educated. I don't think I need to go into it, but you create streaks on Snapchat where you send a picture of yourself to your friend's picture, and you build up 100 or 200 days of being a good friend. If you miss one day because your family's going backpacking, then you are reduced back to 0. It's like the most
Right.
important thing for a teen to be a good friend,
Yeah.
right? And to be, but my stepson who's 17 informed me last night that they changed that. And now you can pay Snapchat to earn your streaks
Oh,
back.
how insidious.
How insidious.
They are so clever.
Yes.
And
And how do you
So
pay them if you don't have credit?
Yes, exactly. My stepson recently participated in BYCC and a trail crew in Richmond, and he loved it. And lunch break was so fun with his peers, and no one was on their phones. A couple times they joined the farm crew in the Monitor barn, which had Wi-Fi access, and he said he was so glad he wasn't on that crew because they were silent during their lunch breaks because they were just scrolling. Very different experience. This is addictive. I've always wondered how people can get addicted to opioid in the brief period they use them after a surgery. But I was recently, for my work, translating for a special ed meeting for a team of educators, 8 in the room, all trying to help a 6-year-old. The goal was language acquisition. And they asked if the mom needed more books at home, bilingual books. She said, since his recent time in the hospital, he was there for 10 days, they gave him unlimited use of his phone. And now he doesn't want to look at any books at all. And they asked if they could bring some toys for her to engage and play with him. And she said he's not even interested in toys anymore. All he wants is his phone. I work with several families like this, and some people say, well, just take the phones away. And the parents say they will scream. They will scream for an hour. These families live in crowded housing where you have tenants on the other side of thin walls, and you can't let your kids scream for an hour or you will lose your housing. My stepson was in the Marines boot camp recently, and we got 3 months of great handwritten letters. He had no access to his phone.
This is the 19-year-old.
It felt like he was back to himself. Every few days we got great handwritten letters, but sadly his brother said at graduation, as soon as he got his phone back, he was up till 4 a.m. in their hotel room on the phone. In the training after boot camp, he and his roommates, he had 3 roommates, and they insisted on the lights off 24/7 with shades closed because all 3 of his roommates were totally addicted. And even in daytime wanted to be able to see their phones. Let's see, I agree with you, Senator Ram Hinsdale, that we really need to have a clear knowledge of what is a healthy amount of screen time. It needs to be something that everyone in our society knows. When I was a kid in the 80s, I just thought cigarette ads in every magazine had a big warning, right? And my parents' cigarette packs, big warning. Like, it was in our face constantly. So we as a generation knew this is not a safe thing. I think every time a kid or adult opens TikTok or Instagram, there should be a warning that cites suicides, that cites all of these things so that it's in our face. I translate for pediatrician appointments, and there are very clear amounts of screen time that are healthy. I would love to see youth who could go around as mentors to educate younger kids. My stepson's girlfriend was talking with my daughter, and she said, my parents won't let me have a cell phone until I'm in 8th grade. And she said, that is awesome. this teenager telling my daughter that that was awesome. And she said, you know, I took Instagram off recently because I noticed it wasn't making me feel very good about myself. My daughter really heard that from a 2-minute conversation with a teen. So I don't know if there's any way statewide we could support these strong youth voices going in to mentor. My favorite lines of this bill you're considering are page 8, the like best interests of children. The part about data and privacy, I honestly don't really understand too much, but it is the addictive nature. My stepson said the biggest thing is the what's it called? The infinite scroll, where you just can go and go and go for hours. The person who invented that can't live with himself anymore because he sees what it's done to our country. It used to be you could look through maybe 15 Facebook things and then you'd have to load more. And just that act makes you say, oh, what are you knitting? Or look up and about and think of something else to do.
Sorry, Liza,
with
did
your
you
day.
hear an interview with the inventor of the infinite scroll who
It's
can't
in
live
the-
with himself?
It's in the book Stolen Focus, which I highly
yeah.
recommend. Yeah, he interviews 200 experts on attention around the world, and so social media comes up constantly. I think this is just one part of the solution, and I'm inspired that you're all giving a lot of time to this. I very strongly support the no cell phones in school S284. I'm sad to hear that it's sort of has gotten a bit watered down or just policy level. I spoke to my brother who moved to New Zealand yesterday. He said, I would move back to Vermont in a heartbeat if it became a state that had no cell phones in schools.
You should email that to the
Wow.
entire Senate
I
education.
should, yeah, exactly. I think we would become a mecca for parents everywhere would want to live in a state where they didn't have to wrestle with that battle, where teachers don't have to wrestle with that
I
battle.
apologize, I have
That's
another
okay,
Yeah.
that's okay,
Thank
let's
you.
see. Yeah, I mean, what Senator Cummings was talking about is schools having 9 to 10 mental health counselors. We are bracing ourselves for the increase of taxes here in Montpelier and the school budget increase of 24%. And I think it's these mental health counselors that I think are directly related to the social media. I mean, after one day off from it, my stepson saying, this has been the best day ever, right? It's like very clear. And all the special ed money for language and just basic development of our kids, because they're not playing, they're not getting bored and going outside. They're not doing all the things that millennia of human evolution has designed to help us communicate and develop and share with others.
And entertain each other.
And entertain each other, exactly. My dad grew up in Derby Line, Vermont, and said, I just played outside because I had like one toy in my bedroom, and I would get bored with that after 15 minutes. This is infinite number of toys, right? Kids will never get tired of this. My husband was visiting some friends of his, 2-parent household. Their daughter was on her phone playing a game where you dress up your little figure and you choose clothes and you choose makeup. And my husband was paying more attention to it than the parents ever had done. And very quickly, the girl's talking about this friend that pops in the chat room with her. And oh, he wants to get in bed and snuggle her. And it was very quickly, very inappropriate content for a 9-year-old girl. And my husband brought this concern privately to the parents, and they had no idea that they had signed parental consent for this version of the game. And it was for 13 and older, but still, like, it's so easy as a busy parent, your kid saying, it's just you dress your kid up, you know? So, yeah. I think that's most of, what I wanted there. It's parents are desperate. It's tearing marriages apart. I spoke with a client who says, I'll take the computer away from my child for half an hour, and then my husband says, just give it to them, you know? And so parents are conflicted, and we just really need more support. My stepson just started working at a restaurant here in town as a busser, and he said last night he worked for half an hour and his fellow busser did nothing because she was on her phone So sometimes I wonder about staff shortages in businesses. Is it partly that attention is half given to their phones instead of what needs to get done so we can all get home? So I don't know if anyone has questions.
Well, thank you.
We're have time for questions,
Yeah,
but like, I mean, you know, it's really hard for parents to get here in the middle of the day with everything that's going on, so, you know, I think it's safe to say you're speaking for a lot of parents who are facing such an uphill battle and need help. And that's when people come to policymakers, so, you know, we appreciate everything you're doing for the community and your own kids. And some of the things you shared that I wouldn't have even thought of as to why maybe these other companies are interested too. You know, I think you're just playing a kids game that you've paid for and as a chat function. So,
Mhm.
extremely helpful testimony. Please stay in touch with us and, you know, thanks for
Yeah.
speaking up for parents.
Thanks for taking up the bill. Yeah, I guess it does seem a little bit short on details of who interprets what is harmful to
Right,
kids
right.
and that elements of it.
Yeah.
But you
And I do want to say for the record, if anybody's been in family court, constantly talking about the best interest of the child, and it's a constant question, right? I mean, courts have said, okay, by the time they're 13, they can decide which parent they want to spend more time with. I mean, you know, judges are making these calls all the time because there's a certain point at which our laws need to leave some room for
Yeah.
common sense and
yeah,
possibility.
but pediatricians do have some very specific
Yeah,
things
yeah.
on this. So
I know, I was gonna say, maybe if they, we could just be extremely specific and say, no more of this, no more of that. No more infinite scroll, you know, no more.
Oh,
But then if they would come up with something else,
Exactly,
we'd have to.
exactly.
yeah.
So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Lisa. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. We appreciate it.